Madam Chair, fellow members of the committee, thank you for letting me be here. Hello, my name is Chris Lake. I'm the pastor at Tree of Life Lutheran Church in Conroe, Texas. My church is part of the Texas-Louisiana Gulf Coast Synod and an umbrella organization of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America. I serve under Bishop Michael Reinhardt as a member of the Short-Term Disaster Relief Committee, which is one arm of the National Lutheran Disaster Relief. Stated more simply, I am just a local Lutheran disaster pastor in the Houston area. In the next 5 minutes, I just want to share with you the following regarding our actions during Hurricane Harvey. First, to give you an overview, our response and actions during the hurricane. Second, I want to share with you how we found resources and money to allow us to respond to those needs. Third, I will share observations of some of the problems seen in our response efforts. And last of all, I will share with you what our church's involvement will be in the response efforts moving forward. I, like many of my colleagues, were not expecting this event or its magnitude. Because Lutherans only make about 2% of the Christians in this area, we do not have a large infrastructure to support a quick response during events like Harvey. During the actual rain event, little could be done, but after things settled down, Bishop Mike Reinhardt had clergy check the status of our people in order to make sure that we had addressed the immediate needs of our membership. Although this might seem insular, it is difficult to respond to communities around us without addressing the needs of our membership first. Basically, we need them to be ready to help us. We are fortunate that for many years our folks have been told to keep resources on hand so that they can be self-sustained for 72 hours, also known as being a 72-hour Lutheran. But it has been our experience that it takes about that long for cities, state, and county governments to be in a position to be able to intervene during a disaster. However, in the case of Harvey, we found ourselves at a disadvantage because of the length and time the initial part of the disaster lasted. And so that really put us in a difficult place finding bodies to help intervene where needed. The Lutherans in this area are very thankful to our Methodist colleagues who have taught us the art of mucking and gutting, which is the process of mitigating damage in homes which have been flooded. This can be used to help those who have been affected with volunteers who have a limited amount of training. Our church has started mucking and gutting homes of families in our own congregations, and after completing the work in these homes, we use those places as launching points to help others. This was done by simply going next door to the home that we just finished and offering our help. It's just that simple. Interestingly enough, one of the things we discovered is that people from surrounding areas would just show up and wanted to help. So we were able to integrate those folks into our teams, or in other cases, we used our teams to integrate with them, just as long as we got the job done. We repeated this process throughout Houston and the surrounding area using limited resources to make the largest impact that we could. In terms of our resources to reach out to those in need, let me show you how we were able to bring this together. As I mentioned, we're a smaller operation than our Methodist or even Catholic brethren here. Because of the grassroots nature of our work, we discovered that social media and Amazon.com are a powerful tool. Just by creating a list and sharing that social media, folks and churches from all over the country were happy to purchase N95 masks, mold killer, and saws and other needed materials to help in the response. We also had folks drive from other parts of the state to bring us large quantities of shovels, buckets, and gloves, which were then distributed where needed. We were so fortunate that we actually have enough supplies and materials that we are better prepared for the next disaster and hope to be able to play a more significant role at that time, hopefully a long time from now. My own congregation received over $10,000 in monetary donations, which we've used to purchase trailers and large resources. I know that other congregations have received similar amounts in donations. This does not include gifts that were sent to our regional office where Bishop Reinhardt serves, which at last count approximately was $300,000. These funds are being distributed first to leadership, clergy, and roster leaders whose homes were affected by flooding. Then donations were sent to congregations whose own facilities were affected. Donations were then sent to congregations to help affected people in the surrounding communities. Finally, we also use those funds to provide a full-time person to take on long-term relief efforts by organizing volunteers who are coming in from out of the state and desire to help. At this point, I wish to address some of the concerns that I saw as I worked during this disaster event. And when I say I am a pastor of disaster, I'm truly meaning I'm in the field, in the houses, mucking and gutting, and right along with my own folks. So these are things that I observed with my own eye. The first is the confusion over FEMA, flood insurance, county government, and other entities would work together to help those who've been affected. This process was convoluted and difficult to navigate and continues to be so. I do not understand why I can do my taxes online, but I have to have a case manager to navigate the needs to get emergency or needed funds to resolve the effects of this flood. It continues to be a problem for many. The second is a concern in shelters. Again, during the middle of the flooding, I received a call from both city and local county governments where I reside asking for immediate help to set up a shelter for 100 people. When I stated that we were only able to support 10 to 15 people, I was strongly urged to see if we could expand upon that. We did. Getting verbal agreements with neighboring Presbyterian and the Christian Church, we were able to meet the express need by expanding capacity to 100. My congregation set up in 5 hours all the needed resources to receive those seeking shelter. When we arrived at the location where we were to receive our visitors from other parts of the state, we were told that we were no longer needed as a shelter. I don't need to tell you how that went over with my folks who had done an extraordinary amount of work in a short amount of time. The Red Cross is a very old and noble organization, but in this case, they flat out failed. There seems to be a disconnect between those in charge of shelters and local government that needs to be resolved. The last of my concerns is the ongoing problem of communications during the disaster. I observed that local government and authorities were unable to communicate in a consistent manner with what was happening. In our area, we discovered that we were dependent on the San Jacinto River Authority for information regarding the release of water from the dam. But the information regarding the effect of that water released would have our community was different depending on the authority you talked to. This only added to confusion, which led to more fear and rumors.
So this is an interesting point. When do you think people learned that the San Jacinto River Authority was going to release the water?
So I can actually speak to this because I was about 200 feet of seeing that same water in my own home.
Okay.
Because
I don't recall seeing any of that on the news.
What I can tell you is the way I found out was the local constable sounding his siren coming down my street to wake us all up at 6 a.m. in the morning. At which point then myself and all my neighbors got up and walked down to the lower end of our neighborhood to help move people out of their homes and to get them out of harm's way, as at that point we were told that the 80 cubic feet of water was going to be released, which according to my daughter, who's quite intelligent, is 60 million gallons of water a minute. And it was headed our way. And it all happened at 6 a.m. in the morning.
Madam Chair, I live in the same area, Scott Moore, Texas Conference, and have quite a bit of experience with the San Jacinto River Authority. To my knowledge, as a resident of the area, there was no forewarning given when the release was going to happen. The communities along the San Jacinto River suffered a catastrophic flood in 1994 in which approximately, I believe, 36,000 cubic feet per second were released. And this release out of this event was over 80,000 cubic feet per second. So they more than doubled what they knew was already going to flood communities downstream.
I mean, and that's pretty much what I have been hearing, is that this community was given all with no notice, that basically they woke up and their homes were flooding.
Yes, ma'am.
And that is a direct result of the San Jacinto River Authority making the decision to release the water.
Which obviously they needed to do as they were bringing more water into the lake than they could support. And
Right.
They were concerned about levees and dams, and I can appreciate that concern. What I was concerned about is that there seems to be a massive disconnect between what the River Authority was doing and what the local law
Right.
enforcement and county officials seemed to be. And so basically, they would show up in large trucks and say, "Run for your lives," which didn't necessarily help lower or create a sense of control in the midst of a disaster.
Right, when the decision was made by, to release the water in the, I guess, in the Barker and the Cypress reservoirs, I mean, that was a fairly well-communicated event, if I recall. And basically, everyone there was a map, and they were like, if you live in, the shaded area, your home will flood. And so it seemed to me, not that, I mean, it was a horrible event, but what the San Jacinto River Authority did just strikes me as particularly disturbing, because I just did not, and I still don't get the sense that community was given any reasonable warning.
As far as I'm aware, ma'am, and it's Chris Lake, I am not aware that when we went to bed that night that we thought that the amount of water release would be to that extent. There was no way to communicate that in a succinct and less frightening way,
Right.
put it that way. And when you're in the midst of something like that, anytime you can control the information in a way that allows folks to make reasonable and good decisions, keeps people from getting hurt. So it was it was quite because there were so many unknowns, and people begin to make assumptions, and those assumptions were based on feelings, but they weren't necessarily correct. Then just to conclude here, then. I truly feel that what we need is solid communication and a source of continued constant information for folks who may be in that situation. Even law enforcement who were present that day did not seem to have the answers or questions to know who to ask. After the flooding, this seemed to be improved once state troopers were present, providing security and a sense of control, which I deeply appreciated. Last of all, let me just quickly share with you what the Evangelical Lutheran Church is, though potentially small, what we will be doing in this area. It is positioned, like I said, in a much stronger position for future responses. We have built strong relationships with other denominations so that we can work effectively together. We are currently helping to get volunteers from other state organizations and directed them to places where they need assistance. And we're fairly excited about this, that we have 27,000 youth coming from all over the country coming to Houston area this summer for a national youth gathering, and these students will play a role in helping rebuild and restore our community while we are here. I want to thank you for your time. I hope that overall we are able to learn from these events so that together we can effectively help intervene upon when called.
Great. Thank you all.
Thank you.
For your testimony.